Hello. Thanks once again to the Crude Oil Mechanicals. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. But you might be forgiven for thinking, what are these guys doing? Dressing up in bright colours and prancing about and talking about a climate crisis. Don't they realise there's a war on and people are suffering and dying right now? There's your real crisis. Well, we do, of course, understand that. There is a war on. In fact, there's more than one. With so much focus, understandably, on Ukraine, we mustn't forget about Yemen, which has been going on far longer, has caused far more suffering, and yet gets only a fraction of the publicity. They are very different conflicts, but with one commonality. Both are being waged by repressive and powerful regimes with wealth and power that stems mainly from oil and gas. They are both products of the same system, a system that is fundamentally sick. And that sickness is the sickness of addiction, our own addiction to fossil fuels. That's why Extinction Rebellion is demanding an end to this fossil fuel economy. The UK government needs to stop investment in fossil fuel exploration now. Only in this way can we break the cycle of addiction and destruction. This will be the central demand for our rebellion, which starts in London on April the 9th. If this sounds drastic, that's because it is. But it is absolutely necessary. And here's why. Let's consider the crisis in the context of what's happened in Ukraine. To call it a fossil fuel war, too simplistic. But bottom line, the Putin regime, the bombs raining down on Kyiv, on Kharkiv, on Mariupol and other places are paid for mainly by fossil fuels, which are bought by us. In Western Europe, we rely on Russia for 41% of gas, 27% of our oil. We are a society addicted to fossil fuels, and Putin is the pusher. These things didn't happen by accident. Western European nations have chosen to tie themselves to this dreadful regime for commercial reasons, market-driven reasons. In the US, they get hardly any oil at all from Russia, but already it's being used as a pretext to drill more, to weaken legislation. Again, market, not morals, is driving an agenda that is wrecking our planet. Let's consider it in the context of COVID. There's broad agreement among scientists now that it was passed to humans from animals, a product of our unnatural relationship with the natural world, of a food system that's driving environmental destruction, supply chains that rely on shipping and air freight, fossil fuels. We saw at the start of the pandemic just how fragile those supply chains are. Let's consider it in the context of prices. They were rising since well before the war, driven by a surge in demand post-COVID and reliance on price-sensitive imports. Again, market, not morals, is deciding this. A market that doesn't price in our destructive behaviour, which prefers to call ecocide externality, the unintended consequences of perfectly rational market-led behaviour. And now let's consider it in the context of the climate and environmental emergency. This might seem less urgent than COVID and Ukraine, certainly less immediate. Well, think about this. In February 2020, worldwide there were a recorded 2,714 deaths from COVID. From pollution, estimates about 800,000. We didn't really hear about that, do we? Why? Because that is the norm. And it's happening right now. Make no mistake, this is an immediate threat. But it is, of course, a future threat, a huge looming horror. Wars end, dictators are deposed or they die. This is here to stay. And if we do not take action now, it is set to get much, much worse. You might have missed the UN's latest IPCC report. It couldn't have come at a much worse time. It's been buried in the rubble of reporting on Ukraine, but it has been described as the bleakest yet. It makes it clear that we still have a window in which to act, but it is closing rapidly. It also makes it clear that our leaders are failing us. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "This is a damning indictment of leadership." Let's just consider this in the context of the current crisis. Boris Johnson talks about new oil and gas projects, which would need to go well beyond 2050 to be attractive to any investor. That is beyond the government's own net zero targets, which are enshrined in UK law. Biden's progressive climate agenda is held up in Congress by a tiny minority of his own party. Meanwhile, he boasts about drilling for more oil than under the Trump administration. Again, even the ambitious politicians, and I do believe he has genuine ambition, are hobbled by the system. We cannot trust them to do what needs to be done, as you cannot trust the addicts in the grip of withdrawal. They will need help, our help, to kick the fossil fuel habits. I'm sorry, guys. I know this is hard to hear. We've had a pandemic. Now there's a war. There's a cost of living crisis. We're all knackered. Do we really need to think about all this on top of everything? I'm afraid we do. Even though it would be easier to pretend it isn't happening, we need the courage to face it. We need the energy to change it. We need to find that from somewhere, because there is still time. The world will change. What we do now will decide how much. Sir David King, former Chief Scientific Advisor to the government, note the word former, he's now not afraid to say what he thinks, said what we do in the next 3 or 4 years will determine the future of humanity. That was in 2021, it's already 2022. The clock is ticking, folks. This sort of talk is often described as apocalyptic. But the original word apocalyptic derives from apocalypsis, which is a Greek word meaning revelation. Yeah. And I prefer to think of it in those terms. Could this be the time when the scales finally fall from our eyes? When, like the addict, we experience a moment of clarity, honestly confront our own addictions and change the behaviour that's destroying us? I'm an optimist. I think we can. It's a huge undertaking, but we can do extraordinary things. The COVID vaccine has proved it. Again, that was with investment and political will. This needs unprecedented ambition. We need Industrial Revolution plus Marshall Plan plus New Deal plus, and a new mindset so we can build a regenerative society with climate and social justice at its heart, where we can all thrive as part of thriving ecosystems. We are not seeing anything like the necessary scale of ambition from our leaders. What we are seeing is them fiddling while our home burns. That is why Extinction Rebellion is demanding an end to the fossil fuel economy. We will be demanding through April Rebellion and beyond, a reminder that starts on the 9th, until we see it done. We know it's easy to feel helpless in the face of this barrage, this storm, but taking action is the most empowering thing we can do. And it's working. Since XR started in 2019, Parliament has declared a climate emergency. Net zero has been enshrined into UK law. Net zero and protection of ecosystems are talked about in business and government circles all the time. The government has set up a citizens' assembly Its findings aren't binding as we've demanded, but still, these are wins. And it's worked through history. Workers' rights, civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ, disabled rights, all came about by civil disobedience, by righteous pressure. The system is cracking. That is plain to see. We must keep up the pressure, or it'll take us with it when it goes. If you're already convinced, or if we've convinced you, then come and find out about the April Rebellion. Did I mention it starts on the 9th?
Yes.
If you're not sure, you have doubts or questions, come and talk to us. Share your doubts, your fears, your hopes. Walk and talk with us. There's a talk at the Elephant and Castle on Monday evening. Next Extinction Rebellion Lewes gathering is on Wednesday at the link later. Come. That's enough from me. Today's supposed to be about hearing from you. So come and talk to us, please. Walk, talk with us. We hope afterwards you will choose to join with us, because together we can make great things happen. Thank you.